right? So just picture yourself in a bustling plaza, just people everywhere, right? In Arganda del Rey.
Okay.
It's 2003, warm summer night. Champions League is on Real Madrid. Big game.
Ew.
The air is thick, with that anticipation.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's kind of on edge. And imagine those cheers, the groans, the eruption of the crowd when something happens.
Right. Everyone's glued to the TV.
Except those sounds aren't from the television.
Oh,
Gunshots.
you're drawing us right into it. And that's what makes the playing card killer case so chilling,
Yeah.
It wasn't just that Alfredo Galán committed these horrific crimes. It was the way he inserted them into the everyday lives of people who just had no idea what was coming.
And that detail from the Diario de Arganda about residents mistaking those gunshots for the roar of the crowd at the watch party, that stuck with me. I mean, it speaks to how this guy Galán wasn't some shadowy figure,
Right.
Lurking in the darkness, he brought terror right to their doorstep.
And he did it not just once, but 6 times over 3 long months in 2003. 6 murders, 3 attempted murders, each more baffling than the last.
It's like something out of a nightmare. One minute you're enjoying a drink at a bar, the next you're staring down the barrel of Galán's gun.
Just terrifying.
And the newspapers, especially the local ones like Diario de Arganda, they paint a terrifying picture of a city on edge. Nobody knew who would be next. And what made it even more terrifying was that there was seemingly no pattern, no connection between his victims.
And what we do know from sources like El Debate is that Galán confessed, claiming that he was driven by a need to know what it felt like to kill.
Which is just bone-chilling. But to think he was so methodical about it, planning his attacks, choosing his moments, and then there's the playing card.
Right.
It's almost like he wanted to be caught to taunt the investigators with his calling card.
I don't know if I'd go as far as saying you wanted to be caught, but it's undeniable that the playing cards, which pasted text Article 1, suggests were unintentional. At first, they became a huge part of his identity as the playing card killer. They terrified the public-fueled media frenzy and really ramped up the pressure on investigators.
Yeah.
Can you imagine being tasked with catching a ghost, someone who seems to be operating on pure impulse?
I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
But we've talked a bit about the impact of Galán's actions, the fear that gripped Madrid.
Yeah.
What I find myself asking is what kind of person could do something like this? What goes on in the mind of someone who could so casually take another person's life?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there are rarely easy answers when it comes to dissecting the mind of a killer.
I mean, where do you even begin with that question, right? Is it something they're born with some kind of darkness inside them? Or are they shaped by their experiences, twisted by events that push them over the edge?
It's the age-old nature versus nurture debate, right? And with a case like this, it's impossible to ignore either side.
Right.
What we can do is look at what we know from the sources and see what pieces of the puzzle kind of start to fit together.
Okay, so Galán's Wikipedia entry mentions he had a military background.
Oh, yeah.
He served in Bosnia.
Which had to be intense.
And was even involved in the cleanup after the Prestige oil spill.
Right.
Those aren't exactly, walks in the park.
Exactly. Pasted text Article 1 even delves into the psychological impact of those events, particularly the oil spill.
Yeah.
Imagine the sheer scale of that disaster, the environmental devastation, the human toll. It's not a stretch to think that witnessing something like that could leave a mark on someone's psyche.
Right. It makes you wonder if those experiences were a breaking point for him or if they just amplified something that was already there.
And that's the heart of the debate, isn't it? Did those experiences create a killer, or did they simply give him the tools and the opportunity to act on darker impulses that already existed? It's a question that experts are still debating, as you can see from the conflicting viewpoints presented in pasted text Articles 1 and 2. Some argue he was cold and calculating a predator in the truest sense. Others suggest he may have been suffering from an undiagnosed mental illness, which has a whole other layer of complexity.
See, that's where I get tripped up. If he was truly ill, does that excuse what he did?
Right.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
Absolutely. And it raises those really difficult questions about criminal responsibility, about what it truly means to be culpable for your actions.
Yeah.
It's a conversation that extends far beyond just this case, prompting us to examine how we as a society view justice and accountability, especially when it comes to mental health.
It makes your head spin. This whole case, it's like trying to untangle a giant knot. And just when you think you might be getting somewhere, something else comes up that throws you for a loop. Like, take this letter he sent from prison that El Debate talks about.
Oh, yeah, that's a chilling detail. Here's Galán locked up for these horrific crimes, and he's writing a letter to the police about an unrelated case offering his help with the investigation.
Like some kind of twisted consultant.
Exactly. He's analyzing the case, even drawing comparisons to Hannibal Lecter. It's disturbing on so many levels, not least of which is that it suggests this fascination with crime, this need to control and dissect it, never really went away, even behind bars.
Which begs the question, is it even possible? Like, can someone like that ever really change?
That's a tough one, right? And it's one that the filmmakers behind that Netflix docuseries, Baraja, La Firma de un Asesino, they grappled with that too. Pasted Text Article 1 talks about how they went into the project thinking they knew the story.
Right.
But pretty quickly they realized how much more there was to uncover.
Like maybe we only have a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, and they started uncovering details that challenged the official narrative, like inconsistencies in witness testimonies, questions about just how thorough the investigation itself really was.
So you're saying there might be more to the story than Galán being a lone wolf?
It's definitely something to consider, right? Was there more going on than meets the eye? Was Galán a scapegoat, or did he maybe have help? And even if he acted alone, was the rush to judgment really justified? These are questions that people are still debating even today. It's wild. And while those questions swirl around, we can't forget about the real people whose lives were shattered by this case, like Teresa Sanchez. Her story is featured in Pasted Text Article 1.
Yeah, her story is a stark reminder of the human cost of these crimes. She lost her son in that bar shooting, and her life was forever changed. Those scars, both physical and emotional, they run deep.
It's just a heavy reminder that even when a case is officially closed, the victims and their families continue to live with the consequences, and we're left wrestling with this idea of justice. What does it really look like, not just for society, but for those directly impacted by such a tragedy?
It's a question that really stays with you, long after the headlines fade and the courtrooms are empty. It forces us to confront the complexities of crime and punishment, of rehabilitation and forgiveness. This entire deep dive has been like peeling back layers of an onion. Just when you think you're getting to the core, there's another layer, more questions, more to unpack.
And that's what makes a case like this so compelling, even after all these years. It's a stark reminder of the darkness that can reside in seemingly ordinary people. But it also highlights the resilience of the human spirit.
And speaking of resilience, here's a final unsettling thought to leave you with. Alfredo Galán is scheduled to be released from prison in 2028,
Oh, wow.
having served the maximum sentence under Spanish law.
His release is certain to reignite the debate about his guilt, his motivations, and whether true rehabilitation is even possible in a case like this.
So as we close this chapter of The Playing Card Killer, we're left with more than just facts and theories. We're left with a profound sense of unease, a lingering question that each of us must answer for ourselves. Can someone who has committed such heinous acts ever truly pay their debt to society? And what happens when they're given a second chance? It's a question that will likely stay with you long after this deep dive is over.